Let us pass now to the part 3, which is identification of some of the insufficiencies of quantum chemistry for chemical reactions, which is a central issue of this series. Let's look at some of the chemical reactions which we are interested. We are interested in energy. The entire efforts of the new mathematics, new physics, new chemistry are all centered, remember the preceding lecture, in building machines, producing new clean energies and fuels. So we are interested in combustion. So those are some examples, very well known, of combustion of the hydrogen, combustion of methane, combustion of propane, etc. Those are very well known. This is the energy that they produce, etc. What is the main point of interest for this series of lectures, ladies and gentlemen? The main point is all those reactions are irreversible over time. What does it mean? It means that if you reverse the time, you see the hydrogen molecule that spontaneously, I have to insist, spontaneously decomposes itself and reproduces the original hydrogen and oxygen in violation of causality, energy conservation, and everything else. I have to insist on the word spontaneously because it has to be, the reverse process has to be the same as the original process. Exactly the same way the original combustion occurred, the spontaneous decomposition has to occur. But ladies and gentlemen, this is a burning of coal. If we invert time, we will see smoke and ashes reconstruct the coal. Ladies and gentlemen, this is absolutely unacceptable for any quantitative scientific studies of combustion. Namely, it is my opinion, after spending years in trying to study combustion, why new combustion, new fuels, new clean fuels, new energy. Of course, old stuff, you can do it, plenty of it. Keep doing. I have no interest. I'm interested in new fuels with a new chemical structure that therefore admit full combustion, as you will see in level 5. It's already industrial, developed at the industrial level in various countries anyhow, even though still very little known in academia to their detriments because they've been available for decades. But so after spending decades in using quantum chemistry, I had to give it up. Why? Because the very axiom of quantum chemistry are reversible over time. This process is irreversible. So it was unavoidable, if we had to achieve any serious advancement in new fuel and energy, it was unavoidable that we had to develop a covering of quantum chemistry that was irreversible beginning from the axioms. Where is the insufficiency? Ladies and gentlemen, the insufficiency is in the mathematics. The Hilbert space have no arrow of time. So there is no hope that you can represent exactly irreversible process such as this combustion by using Hilbert spaces. It is absolutely, will be preposterous by anybody who claims so. What is debatable is what is the covering of the Hilbert space, which is irreversible and allows quantitative treatment of irreversible process. This is debatable, but not their need, not their needs. Let's look at, after studying this issue for decades, ladies and gentlemen, I had to go to the most ultimate root of the Hilbert spaces, of the numbers theory, the very, very ultimate roots. At least this is my conclusion, that you will see developed at the full mathematical level in level 2, 3, and 4. The ultimate origin of the reversibility of quantum chemistry is in the product of operator, product of observable. Because by central unspoken assumption, but it is there implicitly in the Hilbert space, that the product of an operator to the right or the product of the other operator to the left, they are identical. Whether you multiply to the left or to the right, you obtain the same results. Namely, mathematically, we would say the multiplications is not ordered, is arbitrary. The order of the multiplication is unsettled. I studied the issue of the origin of the reversibility of quantum chemistry for years and years. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the conclusion. If there are alternatives, please bring it to my attention. I would say thank you, because we are talking about very fundamental issue that will persist for the rest, most of the 21st century, I suspect. Ladies and gentlemen, from this assumption, then I have proved that quantum mechanics, and particularly quantum chemistry, admits both reaction, not only the combustion of hydrogen, but also the spontaneous decay of the water molecule into the original constituents, because the theory has no arrow of time. The probability amplitude is insensitive to the arrow of time. And of course, the calculation of this prediction is not presented, in my knowledge, nowhere in any PhD course in quantum chemistry, in no department of physics, anywhere in the world, until today, to my knowledge. If there are exceptions, please bring it to my attention. I will say, thank you. So once we identify the origin of the reversibility, it was easy to search for a solution, and this is our solution. My solution is that we introduce an ordering on the multiplication. Namely, we assume that only multiplication to the right are admitted throughout the entire theory, or only multiplication to the left are admitted throughout the entire theory. Mathematically, this means that in quantum the representation in quantum mechanics are called modular, because they occur on one module. Mathematically, this means that the covering representation of the covering of the organic chemistry are bimodular, not enough. Not only are bimodular, but the two modules are inequivalent, so that the multiplication to the right is different than the multiplication to the left. Once you assume this fundamental axiom, then it's very easy to predict that either you have the combustion of hydrogen, or you have the spontaneous disintegration of the water molecule, but not both. And now this elementary idea, ladies and gentlemen, took decades and decades to work out, because this is basically at the foundation of the Lie admissible mathematics, which requires reinspection of beginning from number theory, and the entire mathematics and physics of quantum mechanics and chemistry had to be lifted in a dual form that you will see described beginning from lecture 2C and then lecture 3D, as well as the lecture of level 4 that are dedicated to hadronic chemistry. However, I can assure you that this lifting has produced new fuels that are called gas, that are now sold all over the world, not only in the USA, but also in China, India, Europe, and other countries. And these new fuels have fundamental novelties. Namely, there is a new combustion that we will examine at the level 4. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's go deeper and deeper into and look at limitations, at least some of the limitations of quantum chemistry for living organisms. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I live in Florida, and so I am exposed to this magnificent beaches and waters and palm tree, and this I love Florida. And I am in the middle of beautiful living organisms, and among all the living organisms that I can see here in Florida, those that have repeatedly attracted my attention are seashells. So let me take a seashell here and put it in my hands. This is one of the majestic product of nature. Ladies and gentlemen, just look at this. How can nature, for God's sake, I have to say, is capable of constructing this beauty, just the geometry, etc. It really fascinates me. I am not alone. Virtually most applied mathematicians before me, among them particularly Fourier, have been fascinated by seashells. So the question is, how can nature do this? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is my opinion that it will take to mankind at least 1,000 years minimum to really understand how nature can achieve this majestic construction. So what I can do at the moment is just scratch the surface of a problem of a dimension way beyond our comprehension at this time. So I am an applied mathematician, so the problem is how can we at least describe, forget the understanding, but at least how can we describe this, the creation of this, mathematically, the creation of this living organism. At this moment, I have to make a major distinction. The shape of a seashells can be described beautifully with 20th century mathematics. In fact, Fourier is one of them. Many others, they have achieved exact mathematical representation of virtually all seashells that are around, if not all, most of them, and the remaining one can be represented with some modification of existing. You change the Fourier series, you introduce some other form factor, other things, and you achieve the desired mathematical representation. This is not the topic of this lecture, no. The topic of this lecture is whether we can have a mathematical representation of the evolution in time of a seashells, which is irreversible. All living organisms, they have a birth, they grow, and they die. And it is an irreversible process. So the issue is how we represent this irreversible process. It is at that point where all preceding attempts by applied mathematicians of the past century, including Fourier, are inapplicable, because those were stationary structures. Now, when we look at the time evolution, there are already, before we enter into the technical aspect, let's derive at least some elementary aspect that we can, just by observing a seashell and its evolution in time. First of all, we perceive the seashells with our 3 Eustachian lobes, which means these seashells exist for us in our Euclidean 3-dimensional space. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very easy to see that the 3-dimensional Euclidean space cannot possibly represent the evolution in time of the growth in time of a seashell, for obvious reason. The Euclidean space has no arrow of time, while this has indeed an arrow of time. And in any case, the biologist Hillert in Australia created some computer simulations of, he has done beautiful representation of the shape of seashells, precisely as done by Fourier and other applied mathematicians, but the novelty that he has applied now a time evolution. And in computer simulation, he has shown that if by imposing the axiom of a 3-dimensional Euclidean space, the growth of the seashell first becomes deformed and then it cracks. You can see it in the screen that it cracks. We knew this in advance, because you need an irreversible structure from the axiom of the space in order to achieve a consistent representation of an irreversible process. The conclusion is that another conclusion is that even though we perceive this as existing in 3 dimensions, by no means this means that the seashell exists in reality in 3 dimensions. Mainly we are talking about the fallacy of our sensory perception as far as space is concerned. In regards to time, the departure from reality to our sensory perception, as we will see in a moment, is even greater. In other words, we see these seashells with our eyes. And since we see it with our eyes, we conclude these seashells exist in our time. The same when we look at a plant, we think that they exist in our space-time. Not necessarily so, ladies and gentlemen, as we will see. In other words, what I'm trying to convey is that the complexity of living organisms is simply beyond our imagination at this time. So we can only scratch the surfaces of the very intriguing open problems that are available for any curious scientist who is capable of escaping the coercion of existing politics in academia. As I did, indeed, I've been lucky enough to do. Okay, so let's keep going and start. First of all, to the best of my knowledge, ladies and gentlemen, a quantitative representation of the growth of seashells requires multi-valued hyperstructures. Namely, requires the hyperstructural branch of hadronic chemistry. What does this mean? Basically means we're talking about multi-valued hyperstructure. Careful, those are not the hyperstructure of pure mathematics. Hyperstructure in pure mathematics, they have no unit. Since they have no unit, they have no fields. They cannot be tested to the best of my knowledge. No. The hyperstructure of hadronic mechanics are multi-valued, and and they are based on corresponding multi-valued units. So this is here is an example. That's what Euler did. He enlarged the space from 3 to 6. By enlarging the space from 3 to 6, he was able to obtain a quantitative representation of the growth of the this seashell. This, I think, was an historical achievement made by Euler, ladies and gentlemen. Now, here is my contribution. My contribution is the following. This looks like six-dimensional. Well, it cannot be six-dimensional because we perceive the seashell with our three Eustachian lobes. So we have to achieve compatibility with our sensory perception. Our sensory perception, again, is three-dimensional. And that's what is the achievement of the multi-valued hyperstructural branch of hadronic chemistry. Because in this case, we have an hyperunit, which is three-dimensional. But each dimension has two values. So what we have a two-valued, three-dimensional hyperstructure. I repeat, mathematically we have a two-valued, three-dimensional, 1, 2, 3, hyperstructure, because the operations are way beyond, immensely over the mathematics of quantum chemistry. The point is this, ladies and gentlemen, that from an abstract viewpoint, a three-dimensional, two-valued hyper-Euclidean space is isomorphic to the Euclidean space. At the abstract level, you don't see the difference. You just have a broader realization. And since you achieve axiomatic unit at the geometric level with Euclidean space, then we achieve compatibility between the necessary mathematical representation of the growth of a seashell and our sensory perception. So this is basically the necessity of, as far as I can see, ladies and gentlemen, of a multi-value hyperstructural formulation in space for biological structure. When we pass to time, the situation, ladies and gentlemen, becomes so complex that beyond any comprehension. I always make the statement that I cannot understand infinite dimensional Hilbert spaces, and anybody who claims that can understand infinite dimensional Hilbert space, I believe either is not in good faith or he did not understand the complexity. The same situation here. Regarding the time evolution, ladies and gentlemen, the situation is so complex. I can represent it mathematically, yes, but not. I cannot understand. In fact, there is the problem of the bifurcation as one example of many problems, the extreme complexity in the biological world. It has been proved also by Euler and others that for a seashell to build those magnificent bifurcations, that the seashells needs a continuous knowledge of all four directions in time. I repeat, a quantitative representation of the bifurcations in a seashells can be achieved, to my best knowledge, if and only if we assume that the seashells has a continuous knowledge of all four directions of time. First of all, what are those? People think there are only two-dimensional time. This is very old stuff. This is Eddington of time arrow. No. In reality, we need four directions of time because we have motion forward in future time, or motion forward in past time, and then we have motion backward in future time and motion backward in past time. All four directions are necessary, to the best of my knowledge, for a quantitative representation of the bifurcation. This means that just the question, what is the time evolution of a seashell, has no meaning whatsoever, none, to the best of my knowledge, due to the complexity of the structure. Now, when we go to the DNA, then these issues are multiplied in complexity. And the need for the hyperstructure becomes mandatory, to the best of my knowledge. What is one of the many aspects that will take 1,000 years for mankind to understand how a DNA can produce an entire organism with the complexity of a human being? Well, one thing is that, let's say, those two atoms, atoms A and B, when they correlate, they correlate, they can produce an entire organ such as the eye. So my eye can originate from those two atoms. Those other atoms, my finger can originate. The nail of the other can originate, and so on. This is so basically the correlation of two atoms produces an enormous numbers of atoms in the actual final individual, such as me, my eyes. Okay, what is this mathematically? Mathematically, this is an hyperstructure, because the product of two entities produces an unlimited ordered number of elements. This is precisely the very central notion of the hyperstructural branch of hadronic mechanics and chemistry. As a matter of fact, it was born here. But more precisely, ladies, I have to express my point that the understanding, only the idea that we can understand the code of the DNA by using numbers that are 3, 4, 5,000 years old, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ladies and gentlemen, this idea I have to qualify as preposterous, because we cannot possibly dream of achieving a complexity and understanding of the complexity of the code in the DNA by using 3 or 4,000 years old numbers, ladies and gentlemen. My God, this is human knowledge has not stopped in number theory at 3 or 4,000 years. That's why we developed the hyper numbers, in which precisely the product of 2 multiplied by 3, forget about 6, is an order, can be 10 to the 30, 10 to the 40 order results. And that's by verifying the axiom of a numerical field. That's at the very foundation of the hadronic chemistry. We will review those aspects in the lectures of level 4. Let's now conclude this lecture with part 5, namely on the limitations of available analytic equipment for the measurements of chemical features as available at this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to express my distress. I have no other word that indicating distress. Why so? For a number of reasons that I would like to elaborate, and again, I'm not expecting colleagues, especially analytic chemists, I'm not expecting them to agree, but I'll appreciate if at least they consider my reservation, because we have produced some new results published in referee journals, so maybe our studies have a grain of truth. Well, these are some of the beautiful analytical equipment that have been developed throughout the 20th century, and now they've reached extremes of sophistication. Indeed, by passing to elution time of the order of 20 minutes, now they go to less than a minute, and they by producing truly outstanding results, so analytic results and measurements. So the question, Dr. Santilli, why you have all this reservation? You feel distressed with respect to fantastic results? Yes, I am distressed because the number of reasons. Those instruments have been specifically conceived and developed for one chemical species, which is the species of molecules named atoms under a valence bond. So they've been developed under the theology that all bonds in nature are of valence. A theology that is virtually universal, if not widespread, virtually universal in all chemistry quarters all over the world. That is what I object. And that's what we have. We have rather vast experimental evidence illustrating our point. What is the reason for my distress? The reason of my distress is this, that that to achieve faster and faster results, more accurate results, the ionization energy has increased. Not only the elution time has decreased, so the results are faster, but ionization energy has increased. And for molecular structure, this has been done for very good reason. Yes, this is absolutely acceptable. Indeed, no matter what ionization energy or the detecting means for the molecules are used in this or other instrument, they are way below the energy needed to separate molecules. So, so for molecules Those instruments are perfect. The point, however, that they do that the widespread opinion is here is a chemical analysis, so this is the result, ladies and gentlemen. Then in my case, I have to object. No, then it's an experimental belief, because as a scientist, I will accept the result if and only if confirmed by an independent analytic instrument, and not only a different instrument, but also a different procedure. For instance, you detect in the mass spectrum a peak at 18 atomic mass unit, and you claim that is water. This is at that stage stated as such. That is an experimental belief claimed by the machine or the operator. It becomes a scientific statement if the same species is subjected to a different analysis, such as via the infrared detector, and the infrared detector independently confirms that peak, that cluster at 18 atomic mass unit as precisely the three major resonating frequency of the water molecule. Then that is a scientific statement. But claiming a result with only one detection with those machines, I'm sorry, I never accepted and never will until there is. Now, why so? Because then at this moment there is a dramatic departure with chemists. And they have all sorts of claims. Oh, Dr. Santilli is a mathematician, he does not understand chemists. Since they have no argument to oppose what you will see in a moment, so they usually derail the issue with this type of non-technical statement. Everything I have about to say is published in referee journal. They have to prove in referee journal that with only one measurement that what they state is the truth. Okay, let's go a little bit deeper into the issue. Okay, this is a typical mass spectrum from. Now, my point is that yes, if you have a molecular structure and it is proven to be purely molecular, namely all bonds are of valence type, and this statement is verified by at least one independent analysis, and then this is a serious statement. In this respect, I have to note a dramatic difference between analytic laboratory, beginning with the best analytic laboratory in academia, and forensic laboratory. Analytic laboratory in academia, they throw one, here is a scan, here is push the button, here is the interpretation, this peak is this, that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, compare with the forensic laboratory. Forensic laboratory in the United States of America, as I expect also in the other civilized and developed country, they are demanded by law to have two independent measurements of the same species. Otherwise, they send to the electric chair an innocent guy on the claim that this machine has stated so. My distress originates from the fact that, according to clear evidence, some of which we'll present now, just to give you a glimpse, but we'll review in details at level 4 of this World Lecture Series. According to this rather vast evidence, there exists species of chemical structure, clusters in nature, whose bond is much weaker than the valence. In fact, an entirely new industrial development has achieved worldwide attention, such as the case of the fuel manganese, that has been conceived and developed to have a structure, the cluster, to have a bond necessarily weaker than the valence, as a necessary condition to allow full combustion. Let me put it in a different way. What is the primary problem as far as from an environmental viewpoint of gasoline and conventional fossil fuel? Is that their valence is too strong, and since it's so strong, it does not allow full combustion. You end up with debris out of the combustion, are called hydrocarbon and so on. So if you want to improve the combustion, as we did, we have to conceive a new species that is weaker than the molecule, so as to allow full combustion. This was, again, is known all over the world at industrial level. In academia, not yet, but has been available. Is their problem if they have not educated themselves to those advances. But the point, as far as analytic instrument is concerned, is the following. that those clusters are conceived and developed and industrially produced with a bond which is weaker than the valence. When these new species are inspected with available analytic equivalent, then the instrument destroys the very species that has to detect. I repeat, my distress is that the existing analytic equipment, they are so powerful and they are so efficient and so fast for conventional molecular species that they destroy, in several cases, they destroy the novelty. They destroyed new species that have been conceived and developed to have a weaker bond, because their ionization energy or other process or the elution time or the column temperature or other reasons are magnificent for molecule, but not for the new species. And therefore, this is essentially the origin of the widespread belief that the entire nature, the chemistry all over the universe, has only one chemical species, that of molecule. This is also the origin of the rather universal belief that the DNA is a molecule. Ladies and gentlemen, I object dramatically, even mentioning the word molecule in connection with DNA. Show me the valence electrons that can bond together this very large number of atoms in such an orderly fashion. The valence electrons are unavailable, ladies and gentlemen. So we are talking about theoretical belief. But the root of this belief in the very conception of the DNA can be seen here. Can be seen the fact that the quantum chemistry misses sufficiently delicate, sufficiently weak detecting means and sufficiently appropriate instrument to detect new species. So therefore, creating implications of potentially historical proportion in the negative, not in the positive side. We will look at this situation in details in level 4, but I cannot close this lecture unless I give you the glimpse of some of the novelty. Here is one. When you show this to a chemist, you see the anguish in general, anguish in the face, the contraction, and because here you see a species at 19 atomic mass unit, H3O. My God, this is not possible. You see a species at 29 atomic mass unit, COH. My God, this is not possible. Or 45. Those are all anomalous species. What they do normally? Immediately they throw, because the idea is, no, there is no novelty. Novelty is impossible. Dr. Santilli is an applied mathematician. He does not understand chemistry because they don't have quantitative argument. So what they say, they come up with the most hyperbolic conjecture to reduce this new species to pre-existing old 20th century knowledge. But the point is, however, then you reach a certain level after which the credibility is totally lost, and you cross the very well marked line between science and politics. In fact, we have created, for instance, one of the objections that they moved when they see this anomalous species, Dr. Santilli does not know chemistry. Those are fragments of a bigger molecule. Fragments of bigger molecule. What is the politics behind? The politics behind the objective is to report to deny knowledge and report new evidence to pre-existing doctrine, so you can have grants, chairs, money, and prizes and the like. Okay, that's the unspoken objective. So one way is, these are fragments of bigger molecules that have been broken by some process. But this and other hyperbolic conjecture have been disproved. So be careful. I recommend caution to chemists, because they may lose their reputation also themselves. The chemists who are listening to this lecture, because we have created the same species starting from the hydrogen molecule, exposes to an electric arc, and created species all the way to 1,000 atomic mass unit. I repeat, starting from a pure hydrogen gas, which has 2 atomic mass units, we have created species all the way to 1,000 atomic mass unit, of course, with decreasing percentage, and via the sole use of an electric arc. In this case, a species at 240 atomic mass unit cannot possibly be claimed to be a fragment of a bigger molecule. There is a limit under which hyperbolic hypothesis specifically intended to preserve old knowledge loses all credibility. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of them. Those are new species in which there is an additional hydrogen atom that is bonded to the conventional molecule, and the bond is new. Is not a valence, cannot possibly be a valence. That is the plausible interpretation. And this is a bond that is already known internationally as the Santilli magnecular bond. This has been verified in many, many ways. Let me show you another scan that creates anguish in chemists who have excessive attachment. Maybe they have a contract to large financial income out of existing quantum chemistry, in which you can see that atomic mass unit increase 151, 152, 153, 154, 155, 156, 157, 59, and this goes on for hundreds of atomic mass units. Ladies and gentlemen, this is incontrovertible evidence of clusters having one individual atomic hydrogen. I repeat, incontrovertible evidence of clusters that have an individual atomic atom, and they can increase that atomic, then increase the accretion of an hydrogen atom virtually all the way up to very high value of the atomic mass unit. Well, what has been proved beyond credible doubt is those bonds cannot be valence. So you can anything except valence, covalence, metal valence. No, they cannot be of valence type. So we have developed a new chemical species that we'll study in great details at level 4 of these lectures. Basically, what we do industrially now, this is the very notion of magna gas. Basically, we deform by using very powerful magnetic fields and extremely strong fields at the order of 10 to the 12, 10 to the 14 Gauss at atomic distance. We deform the spherical distribution of orbitals into toroids. Once this deformation is created, then the orbiting of the electrons in the toroids creates a new magnetic field, very strong, that didn't exist before in the atomic structure before. And once this is created, then if you couple to the other, you see north-south, they automatically bond. We have the equation. We have the equation of the bond. We prove that the bond is indeed attractive, and we prove that it represents represents experimental data. This is a scientific process, so, with quantitative backing verified by experiment. But in this way, basically, you give you a glimpse of one of the possible bond in nature that can exist beyond the valence. When we go back to the DNA, ladies and gentlemen, Santilli magnecular bond can be only one of a large variety of new bonds that can be discovered into this structure, and this can have some significant medical implications, because, for instance, if we can identify different genomes have a bond that is not a valence, ladies and gentlemen, any biochemist can see the implications of what we are talking about. So they also see, consequently, the necessity of surpassing the notion of a valence and opening the eyes, go higher in the scientific mountains and see a bigger scientific vista. And this is the conclusion that, in my view, and 50 years of experience, rather than having reached final stage, as widespread belief in chemistry of the 20th century, our notion of chemistry is at its infancy. And there is so much yet to be discovered. By whom? Only by young minds of any age, as I indicated, provided I should add that those young minds of any age, their view are seated in receptive scientific environment. Receptive means open to at least study, subject to a due scientific process, new ideas, rather than opposing with political argument. In that hope, I say thank you for your attention.